Thank you very much for inviting me. It was great listening to your previous speakers, an excellent group of scholars and activists and experts. It's difficult for me to say really much more because basically everything has been said. So I'll try to briefly speak about the war itself and then move on to an issue that is related. I think it's pretty clear in the eyes of Iranians who won the war because the Iranians were celebrating on the streets across the country when it came to an end. And we did not see similar celebrations in Palestine. In addition to that, we know from important actors in the United States that the situation was dire for the Netanyahu regime. Steve Bannon pointed out after the ceasefire that the real story, the unknown story behind the events was that Trump saved the Israeli regime, and the Israeli regime was in serious trouble. And the United States stepped forward and requested a cessation of hostilities. And of course, the Iranians initially rejected it. And only later, after concessions were made, did the Iranians accept. And we saw Trump unwittingly allude to one of those concessions where he said that Iran can now export its oil to China, even though Iran was exporting oil to China beforehand. But I think it was clear that the United States had promised to back off in this regard. And of course, there are other issues too that the Iranians imposed on the United States before the Iranians accepted a cessation of hostilities. And of course, Trump himself spoke about how badly hit the Israeli regime was. And this is something that someone like Donald Trump would not say under ordinary circumstances. To show the Israeli regime as being weak has not been something that any US president would have done in the past, nor would they like to do so today or in the future. But I think the most important thing is that this whole war is about Palestine, and it is about the people of Gaza. And it is about the sacrifices that people across the region and across the world are making for the people of Palestine. We saw hours ago in Australia huge numbers of people going to the streets in very poor weather. These were not people from one community or another. They were not people from different Middle Eastern countries. They were people who were born, for the most part, and brought up in Australia. People who, for decades, have been living under circumstances where the dominant narrative of Western media has pushed them in a particular direction. Yet when they had the opportunity to see the truth, they courageously put themselves at risk in the workplace, at university, and elsewhere. And today, they combined their efforts and showed the world a magnificent showing of humanity and decency. And hopefully, we'll be seeing more of this across the world in the days ahead. This is about Palestine. This is about how Hezbollah sacrificed itself and its people and its women and children and its young men in order to draw the Israeli regime, its forces from Gaza to help prevent Gaza from falling. It's about the people of Yemen who sacrificed themselves and who withstood the US onslaught because they were helping defend the people of Gaza. And of course, Iran too sacrificed for 40 some years. The revolution itself was about independence, dignity, and it was, when it came to foreign policy, three of the key elements that the revolutionaries stress upon was that Iranian decisions should be made in Tehran, decisions about the country should not be made in Washington or elsewhere. The second was breaking off ties with apartheid South Africa and supporting the revolutionaries and the resistance in Southern Africa. And the third was Palestine. And so antagonism towards Iran was more about Palestine, I would argue, than anything else over the last 4.5 decades, more than 4.5 decades. Whether it was the imposed war, where they used Saddam Hussein against Iran, where they gave him chemical weapons to use against Iran, whether it was the sanctions, whether it was terror groups that carried out assassinations and bomb attacks across the country, killing 18,000 Iranians. These terrorists today are based in the West. Just like today, how Al-Qaeda leaders who blew up bombs, who cut off people's heads, ISIS leaders who burned people alive are now thriving in Syria and have the full backing of the West. We had similar terrorists in Iran who have always been active during these years in creating death and destruction and carrying out espionage in the country. So Iran too has made huge sacrifices. This battle, this war, this 12-day war of resistance was indeed a victory. People were martyred, assets of private citizens were destroyed, public facilities damaged without a doubt. But for the first time, the Israeli regime had to suffer defeat. And despite the fact that the collective West and sadly countries of this region, whether Turkey, Qatar, Jordan, the Emirates, among others, whether they admit it or not, they were deeply involved in supporting the Israeli regime, allowing their bases to be used by the United States for offensive and defensive purposes. And for the very fact that they continue to do trade with the Israeli regime, and I should add the regime in Baku as well, that itself is assistance to genocide and to aggression. But despite all that, despite the fact that the collective West was behind the regime, it was defeated. And this, I think, invincibility, or this facade of invincibility, this myth that they had created, has been blown up and destroyed. But more important than Iran's victory and the victory of the resistance and the axis of resistance is the victory of all those people across the world who over the last 22 months have been creating awareness about Gaza. What we see today in capitals across the world, as I said, in Australia, but also elsewhere, is the result of the hard work of people who've been spending their time trying to create awareness. They could have carried on with their ordinary lives. They could have gone out with their families. They could have spent more time with their friends, but they chose to remain active. I've given this example a number of times before. I remember early on during this Holocaust, there was an image of a lady in Seoul in front of the Israeli embassy. We were told, or I'd read, that she would stand there every day, regardless of the weather, in order to expose the regime. Today, we see across the world huge numbers of people. That woman and women like her, men like her, all of them across the world today are now seeing the results of their resistance, their collective resistance. And I think that this is the greatest success of all. This is the greatest achievement of all. The Israeli regime has been cornered. People across the world look at it with disgust. You see today how openly key public figures in the United States are speaking out against the regime, whether it's people like Candace Owens or Tucker Carlson, among others, and key figures in the public sphere outside of the realm of politics in the United States. They too have shown their disgust at what is going on. And my hope is that we push harder, that all of us do more from today onwards, because these are the most sensitive days. Children are starving, children are dying, mothers are starving, fathers are being shot and killed like as if it's a game for these Israeli regime soldiers. We have to push harder. Now that the world is waking up, we have to wake up those who are still asleep. And I think that if this continues, the legitimacy of the Israeli regime, for me, was never a question. It was always illegitimate. Apartheid is illegitimate. The genocidal regime is illegitimate. But today, the regime is losing this legitimacy in the eyes of so many people, especially in the West, who deemed it to be legitimate once upon a time. You see young Jews across the Western world standing up against the regime. Christians, Muslims, Hindus, the young lady at MIT. All of these images that we've been seeing show that there is a collective humanity that's spread out across the world that is rising up against this. We must push harder to quicken this, to put greater pressure on the regimes that support this Holocaust, and hopefully we'll see the ultimate defeat of apartheid, ethnic cleansing in Palestine. Thank you.
I'm Michael Hudson. I'm appearing here for the International Manifesto Group. If you like this video and ones like it, please subscribe. For more information, go to the address on the screen.